In 2023, in a laboratory in Massachusetts, a team of researchers took a piece of concrete and deliberately broke it. The sample was not new. It was mixed when Rome ruled the world, and it had been sitting in a wall for 2,000 years before anyone put it under a lens. They split it clean through, ran water into the fracture, and waited for it to fail. That is what concrete does. It cracks, water finds the crack, and the material begins to die. Instead, the crack closed. Over the following weeks, the stone grew back into its own wound and sealed itself watertight. A modern sample, cracked on the same day, sat beside it, leaking exactly the way concrete is supposed to leak. The ancient one healed. The new one did not. No material we make does that. The Romans were doing it 2,000 years before anyone thought to check. Understand what that means. Concrete is the most used material on the planet, and everything we pour today is temporary. 50 years, maybe 100, then the cracks win, and we tear it out and pour it again. We have come to treat that as a law of nature. Every road and every bridge around you is on a countdown, and keeping them standing now costs more than building them did. Rome's concrete has been standing for 2,000 years. Its greatest dome still holds up the sky with no steel inside it at all. And in the harbors, sunk in salt water that should have eaten it fastest, Roman concrete did something no material is supposed to do. It got stronger. Somebody knew how to build like that, and then that knowledge was gone. Not stolen, not burned in a famous library. It simply stopped being handed down, and 1,500 years passed before anyone worked out what these men had actually done. When people explain how Rome conquered the world, they talk about the legions. The legions took the ground. The men who walked in behind them with levels and lime and water are the reason Rome kept it. This is the story of who they were. The general who gave up his triumphs to go fix Rome's sewers and toured them by boat. The water commissioner who audited an entire empire and broke a criminal cartel using nothing but paperwork. The finest engineer of the ancient world, killed by a jealous amateur with a grudge. The nameless army crews who bridged the Rhine in 10 days, then burned their own bridge down to make a point. And the emperor everybody wrote off as a dabbler who raised the dome that nobody has beaten in 1900 years. 5 stories and one mystery running underneath all of them. These men built things designed to outlive their own empire, and it worked. What they could not do was leave us the instructions. By the end of this, you will know exactly what was hiding in that concrete, and exactly how a civilization that built forever managed to lose it. Beneath the streets of Rome, in the dark of the greatest sewer of the ancient world, a boat is moving. The man inside it is the second most powerful human being alive. He commands armies, he has won wars at sea, and tonight, by torchlight, he is inspecting drains. His name is Marcus Agrippa. He was the best general of his age, but his most enduring contribution to Rome wouldn't be found on a battlefield. It was found here, in the dark. This is the central paradox of his career. Why would a man who won Augustus and empire choose to rule the drains, volunteering for a job the rest of the Roman aristocracy considered beneath them? Rome, in the 1st century before Christ, was a city of 1 million people drinking from a system built for a town. The aqueducts were centuries old and leaking, the fountains ran foul, and disease moved through the neighborhoods like weather. The Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, older than the Republic itself, was actively choking on the filth of the biggest city on earth. In the face of this crisis, Agrippa did something his peers found laughable. He volunteered for the job of aedile, the lowly magistrate in charge of streets, water, and sewers. It was like a 5-star general asking to run the sanitation department. Rome laughed. Agrippa got to work. What followed was the most significant infrastructure year in Roman history. Agrippa launched a massive overhaul of the city's crumbling aqueduct system. He repaired every aqueduct the city had and completely rebuilt the Aqua Marcia to restore the city's base flow. He then drove a brand new line, the Aqua Julia, directly into the city center, effectively doubling Rome's water supply. To maintain this volume, he created a permanent crew of 240 plumbers, skilled stonemasons, and system inspectors, the first standing water department in history. When he died, he willed this workforce to the state. This bureaucratic invention proved so essential that it outlived the Roman government itself. He turned his attention back underground, to the sewer, dredging and flushing the entire Cloaca Maxima before personally inspecting the work by boat. The most powerful admiral in the world navigating the underside of Rome. In 19 BC, he completed the Aqua Virgo, an aqueduct famous for delivering water that was remarkably pure and cold. That system still functions today. It feeds the Trevi Fountain, meaning modern tourists are throwing coins into water delivered by Marcus Agrippa's original pipes. This new water supply allowed for the construction of Rome's first massive public baths, and Agrippa made entry free. Bathing, previously a luxury for the wealthy, became a right for Romans. Beside these baths, he raised a temple to all the gods, the Pantheon. He didn't just provide water. He used infrastructure to offer the populace a sense of dignity and cleanliness never available to them before. Despite their immense scale, almost none of Agrippa's surface-level buildings survived. His original Pantheon burned to the ground. A century and a half later, the Emperor Hadrian rebuilt it from the ground up, creating the concrete domed masterpiece that stands in Rome today. But Hadrian, an emperor who craved credit so badly it would one day cost an engineer his life, took the uncharacteristic step of putting another man's name across the front of his own building. Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, 3 times consul, built this. Technically, the inscription is false, but in a deeper sense, it is entirely accurate. Hadrian understood Agrippa's name was so synonymous with the city's survival that it couldn't be replaced. Agrippa died at 51, decades before his friend Augustus. Augustus famously claimed that he found Rome brick and left it marble. But marble is just a skin. The actual organs of the city, the water coming in and the waste going out, were Agrippa's. Today, his sewer still drains the forum. His aqueduct still fills the fountains. His name still stands over the Pantheon. The general who chose the sanitation department focused on the mechanics of survival rather than the aesthetics of glory. 2,000 years later, the marble is gone, but Agrippa's work is still there, doing its job beneath the streets. Agrippa died, and the water kept coming. That is the strange thing about what these men made. The system outlived the man by centuries, because it did not live in his head. It lived in the hands of the crews he trained, and those crews trained the next ones. Nobody wrote any of it down. Why would you, when 1,000 men already know how to do it? Which brings us to the one Roman who did write it down, and what he found when he went looking. In the dead of night, outside the city walls, Rome's infrastructure is being robbed. A hidden valve opens, water hissing into the dark. Nearby, a wealthy landowner is handing silver to the workmen paid to guard the supply. They have punched a secret tap into the aqueduct to feed private fields and luxury villas. It is happening across the capital. Thousands of unauthorized lead pipes are quietly bleeding the aqueducts dry, hidden deep within the city's architecture. Rome does not know it yet, but the greatest engineering system on earth is being stolen, drop by drop, by its own people. In the year 97, the Emperor Nerva handed this crisis to a 60-year-old soldier named Sextus Julius Frontinus. Frontinus had governed Britain. He had marched legions through the mountains of Wales to crush local rebellions. Now he was given a job most senators considered plumbing: curator aquarum, keeper of the waters. Rome had made Frontinus consul 3 times, the same honor carved under the name of Agrippa on the front of the Pantheon. Men with that level of political status did not typically spend their days counting pipes. Frontinus carried a military mindset. He viewed infrastructure management as a command requiring absolute discipline. The system he inherited read like a family tree of Roman ambition. Nearly 500 kilometers of channels, tunnels, and stone arches delivered water to the city. 9 lines built across 3.5 centuries, and Frontinus was now answerable for every stone of them. No one alive had ever mapped, measured, or fully understood the complete network. So Frontinus did something no previous commissioner had bothered to do. He walked it. Every line, from the springs in the hills down to the fountains in the forum. He checked the flow rates at the source against the flow arriving in the city. He noted exactly where each line ran underground, where it rode on arches, and mapped where repairs could be made without shutting off the capital. He recorded every measurement and maintenance node into a master set of ledgers. No document like it had ever existed. Rome's water system finally had a memory. Then came the arithmetic. Official government ledgers claimed the 9 aqueducts delivered about 12,000 measures of water to the city. This chart shows the discrepancy he found at the source. Frontinus counted nearly 24,000 measures of water entering the intakes. Half of Rome's water was vanishing between the hills and the city gates. It was not seeping away into the ground. The official records had been intentionally wrong for decades. They were neat, official, and a complete fabrication designed to hide the theft. Frontinus had uncovered a decentralized theft that outpaced any physical decay, thriving in the gaps of the state's own oversight. Wealthy citizens were bribing the watermen, the very crews paid to guard the supply, to facilitate the siphoning of the lines. The thieves relied on a specific geographic trick. They tapped the channels just after the water had passed the official measurement checkpoints, ensuring the ledger books still appeared balanced. They also exploited bureaucratic loopholes. When a citizen with a water grant died, the supply kept flowing for years, quietly collected by whoever owned the property next. Even the hardware was compromised. The official bronze nozzles that metered out each customer's supply were swapped for wider counterfeit versions, stamped with fake measurements to steal excess volume. This was a systemic exploitation of bad data. Rome was dealing with a literal water mafia that reached from country estates into the water bureau itself. Frontinus documented every mechanism of the fraud in an official report to the emperor called De Aqueductu on the aqueducts. Then he went to war on the thieves. Illegal taps were ripped out of the stone and the false measurement tools were destroyed. He introduced a systemic fix, a universally standardized, imperially calibrated gauge. Tampering with one became a crime against the emperor himself. Without building a single new arch or laying one new stone, Frontinus effectively doubled the water actually reaching the city. New fountains rose in dry neighborhoods. The extra volume flushed out the ancient sewers, and the air itself grew cleaner as the causes of unwholesome air were removed. Rigorous bureaucratic enforcement and data standardization had solved a crisis that physical engineering alone could not fix. Looking at the life-giving aqueducts he defended, Frontinus turned to the wonders of the older world and said, "Compare, if you will, the idol pyramids." His arches fed 1 million people every day. When he died, he explicitly forbade his family from building a monument or tomb for him. He believed his memory would endure if his life's work was truly valuable. Of all the great Roman builders of bridges, domes, and harbors, Frontinus is the one whose specific knowledge survived the fall of the empire. He survived because he was the one who wrote it down. The aqueductu still exists, allowing us to read the water mafia's confession today. While the arches and the pipes eventually crumbled, the data Frontinus left behind remained. A bureaucrat with a ledger became the only Roman engineer we can still hear speaking today. Hold on to what just happened there. Frontinus wrote his report, and 2,000 years later, we can still read every line of it. That is the whole difference. What went onto the page survived the empire that made it. Now, here is the other kind of story. The greatest engineer Rome ever produced left his work standing in a river in plain sight. We still cannot tell you for certain how he died or exactly how he did it. In the summer of 1856, the Danube River dropped to its lowest recorded level. Out of the water emerged a perfect line of 20 ancient stone piers, marching across more than a kilometer of the riverbed. Sailors were staring at the bones of an ancient marvel, designed by the most celebrated engineering mind in the Roman Empire, Apollodorus of Damascus. He built the very infrastructure that expanded Rome's borders. Yet the state he served eventually executed him. To understand his rise, we have to look at the year 103. Emperor Trajan gave Apollodorus a staggering military order. He needed to march his army across a kilometer of deep, violent water to fight the Dacians, and demanded it be done without boats. Every engineer in the empire agreed that this was a physical impossibility. The Danube's current was simply too strong to allow workers to sink solid foundations into the riverbed. Apollodorus didn't bother fighting the current. Instead, he temporarily moved the river. This schematic shows his strategy. Instead of attacking the full force of the Danube, crews dug a massive artificial channel, splitting the flow to reduce the water volume. With the current weakened, they drove massive interlocking timber rings into the riverbed, sealing off sections of water. Then they pumped the water out. Apollodorus had created bone-dry workspaces exactly where the river used to be. Inside these dry pockets, crews stacked massive stone blocks to form 20 towering piers. Between them, they sprang layered oak arches, leaping 30 meters across. The entire structure, spanning over 1,100 meters, was finished in just 2 building seasons. The Roman legions crossed the bridge and Dacia fell. Apollodorus had achieved an engineering triumph that set a global length record that would not be broken for another 1,000 years. The victory in Dacia flooded Rome with gold, and Trajan used that wealth to fund the most ambitious construction spree in the empire's history, with Apollodorus leading the charge. The engineer orchestrated an earth-moving operation that sliced away an entire hillside to make room for Trajan's forum. You can still see its massive footprint today, marked by these surviving granite columns. Directly into the freshly cut face of that hill, he built Trajan's Markets. It was a 6-level commercial complex of concrete vaults and semicircular brick halls, operating much like a modern shopping mall 17 centuries early. At the center of the forum stood his centerpiece, a towering marble column, housing a hidden spiral staircase in the dark, wrapped in a continuous ribbon of intricate carvings. Look closely at the stone ribbon, and you will find detailed Roman figures alongside the architect's own bridge, rendered in marble. When Trajan died, his ashes were placed in the base. Apollodorus built his patron's permanent tomb. Apollodorus was the most famous builder alive, standing as Trajan's personal engineer and close advisor. But this proximity to the throne made him increasingly impatient with the courtiers who surrounded him. One day, while he and Trajan were deep in discussion over a building project, a young imperial relative interrupted them. This young man considered himself an architect and enjoyed sketching domes shaped like segmented gourds. Apollodorus turned to him in front of the entire court and told him to go away and draw his pumpkins, saying he understood nothing of these matters. The humiliated amateur was a young man named Hadrian. He would soon become emperor of the world, and he never forgot an insult. Trajan passed away, and Hadrian took the throne. The insulted pumpkin sketcher now held absolute, unchecked power over the state, but Hadrian still craved validation from the professional. He sent Apollodorus his own master design, a grand double sanctuary called the Temple of Venus and Roma, and asked the old master for his opinion on the massive brick apses meant to hold the statues. Apollodorus gave his critique honestly. He wrote back that the temple was built too low to the ground, and that the statues of the goddesses were scaled much too large for their halls. This cross-section illustrates the exact geometric flaw Apollodorus highlighted. The seated figures were trapped. If the goddesses ever wished to stand up, they would smash their heads through the ceiling. A mathematically flawless observation. To the emperor, it was treason. Hadrian retaliated instantly. He banished Rome's greatest engineer from the city, and then, according to historical sources, had him executed on fabricated charges. From that moment on, Apollodorus vanishes entirely from the historical record, silenced at the absolute height of his career. Hadrian even went after the physical legacy. Claiming the Danube Bridge was a security risk, he ordered its wooden arches stripped away. Today, only ruined, bare piers sit in the water. While his stone columns in Rome remain intact, Apollodorus rarely wrote down his methods. When the state executed the builder, they permanently burned the library of engineering knowledge stored in his mind. Rome destroyed its greatest technical genius to protect a fragile ego. But history rarely settles on simple villains, because that same jealous pumpkin sketching amateur was about to design the most perfect dome ever built. Apollodorus at least had a name for Rome to erase. Almost none of them did. For every engineer in the histories, there were thousands working under a rank instead of a name, and they built more of the empire than the famous ones ever did. They left no signatures, no manuals, and no drawings. What they left was the work itself, and a question we are still trying to answer. How do you build like that and leave nothing behind but the building? The greatest bridge in the world is on fire. It is 18 days old, and the man who ordered it destroyed is the same man who ordered it built. He is not sad to see it burn. It has already done its job. In 55 BC, the Rhine was the edge of the world. Germanic tribes crossed it to raid Roman territory and then vanished back home, certain that the great river made them untouchable. Julius Caesar could have pursued them in boats. He refused. He wrote that boats were beneath the dignity of the Roman people. If Rome was coming, Rome would walk. This cross-section shows the solution. Working from rafts in deep, fast water, his engineers drove pairs of massive timbers into the riverbed. They angled the piles against the current, so the river itself locked the structure tighter. They braced those pairs, spanned them with beams, and decked a roadway wide enough for an army to march over the wildest river in Europe. The bridge ran more than 400 meters. They finished it in 10 days. Caesar crossed, burned the raiding tribe's strongholds, then marched back and burned the bridge himself after only 18 days. The message was the structure. Rome did not need a permanent bridge. Rome needed everyone to know it could build one in 10 days, anywhere, forever. 2 years later, the tribes tested Rome again. Caesar ordered a second bridge over the river, and his crews finished it even faster than the first. They operated entirely without blueprints or manuals. The bridge existed in the hands and memories of the men who had built it before. Caesar wrote the famous account, and Caesar took the credit. The men who drove the piles and squared the beams received 1 paragraph and 0 names. Not one of them is recorded anywhere. History remembers the commanders who write the books, while the specialized labor force that actually built the empire is entirely erased. A century later, the same anonymous corps faced the opposite geographic extreme, Masada. The sheer rock mesa rises hundreds of meters above the Dead Sea, accessible only by a single snaking footpath. The rebels holding the summit had years of supplies in stone walls. The Roman legion below stood in a waterless desert. Time was supposed to be on the defenders' side. The 10th Legion answered with shovels. They raised a massive earthen ramp against the western cliff. Thousands of tons of stone and soil locked together with timber cribbing, climbing month after month towards the summit. They winched an iron-sheathed siege tower up their own ramp and broke through the wall. The fortress fell to men with baskets of dirt. The Roman engineering corps rendered natural defensive geography obsolete. If a fortress was unreachable, they simply built the earth up to meet it. The corps' most expansive monument is the 50,000 miles of paved road they laid across 3 continents. A surveyor with a groma, a simple cross of weighted strings, could sight a line so straight it barely bent for 100 miles, cutting through hills and marshes. This cross-section shows the subterranean engineering. Every road was an engineered sandwich, 4 layers deep and cambered to shed rain, built to be marched on for centuries. They were so well placed that Europe never really replaced them. Modern highways in Britain, France, and Italy still run on top of these ancient Roman lines. The entire network was rooted to a single point. In the Forum stood a column sheathed in gilded bronze, the golden milestone, and every road in the empire measured its distance from that center. The phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," describes a literal surveying system designed to tether the known world to one city. Every legion carried builders within its ranks. The army rolls called them immunes, the exempt ones. These were masons, carpenters, surveyors, and smiths. Their skills were worth more than their swords, so they were excused from sentry duty, forming a professional construction corps 5,000 strong. Almost none of what these men knew was ever written down. This deep knowledge lived entirely within the crews. A veteran's hands taught an apprentice's hands, generation after generation. Rome's technological secrets were stored in muscle memory, not libraries. Agrippa's name is on the Pantheon. Frontinus signed his reports. A few architects managed to make it into the histories. But the force that actually built the empire, the men of the 10-day bridge, the desert ramp, and the 50,000 miles of road, left no names at all. They were a living library that never touched paper. When the legions finally stopped marching, everything they knew was still inside them, and it walked out of history with them. While their physical monuments defied time for millennia, the brilliant human minds that conceived them simply vanished, leaving nothing but stone behind. So the knowledge lived in hands, trained hands, rotating through the legions, passing the trade forward, one apprentice at a time without a word of it written. Keep that in mind for what comes next, because those same unnamed hands were about to pour the single most impressive object in the ancient world. No steel, no calculus. 1900 years later, still nobody has beaten it. There is a 9-meter hole in the center of this roof. It is open to the sky, and when it rains in Rome, the water falls directly through the open ceiling and onto the marble floor below. This exposure to the elements was intentional. It has been raining inside this building for 1900 years. This is the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth. There is no steel inside it, no rebar, just stone, mortar, and 19 centuries of survival. Modern engineers, despite their computers and high-grade alloys, generally agree that they would not attempt to replicate a structure like this today. That a building lacking modern reinforcement remains standing after 2 millennia makes it an anomaly defying the standard logic of modern construction. The architect was not a professional, but an amateur with something to prove, the Emperor Hadrian. Before he took the throne, Hadrian was mocked by Rome's lead engineers for his architectural sketches, which they derisively compared to pumpkins. He spent years at his private villa at Tivoli turning those sketches into reality, experimenting with concrete half-domes to learn the mechanics of curvature. Its design is a single geometric idea. The building is exactly as tall as it is wide, meaning a perfect sphere fits precisely within. For a visitor, the space is defined by an invisible globe. The architecture is about the massive mathematical volume enclosed. By basing the entire structure on a single shape, Hadrian ensured that every dimension was locked to the others. To alter any measurement would be to break the mathematical logic of the entire interior. But geometry alone couldn't hold the building up. Thousands of tons of concrete are constantly pushing down and outward, trying to burst the walls and shatter the crown. The 6-meter thick walls answer that pressure with hidden brick arches, which act like riverbeds to catch the weight and steer it into the ground. The dome uses a material gradient. The base concrete is loaded with dense travertine. Halfway up, they switch to lighter brick. At the crown, they use volcanic pumice, stone so airy it floats. The shell also thins dramatically as it rises. On the exterior, 7 concrete step rings circle the lower slope. These act as a physical restraint, squeezing the dome together at the exact point where it wants to burst outward. The structure survives because the builders systematically subtracted density from the material at every stage of the climb. Building the dome took years of patience. Crews filled the rotunda with a massive forest of timber to hold the wet concrete as they poured it in horizontal rings, layer by layer. When that timber was finally removed, the shell had to support its own mass instantly. Inside, the deep recessed squares, the coffers, served a practical purpose. These were not added for decoration. They are scoops of dead weight removed from the ceiling so the dome wouldn't have to carry its own excess mass. The oculus at the top is the final subtraction. It is a ring of open air, where the dome's heaviest and most structurally dangerous weight would have been. By leaving the center empty, the weight is forced to flow around the ring and down the shell. The sun becomes the only light while rain falls through to hidden floor drains. The building's aesthetic is a direct byproduct of its efficiency. It is beautiful because the Romans removed everything that was not essential to its survival. The mathematics required to analyze a dome of this scale would not exist for another 1500 years. The men who built this had no calculus. Instead, they relied on geometry and a physical familiarity with concrete. They understood the material through touch and intuition, a feel for the mix that was passed down through generations of laborers. That intuition was forged 60 years earlier under Nero. His engineers, Severus and Keller, pushed concrete to its limits to build his golden palace. They raised an octagonal hall with a concrete dome and, according to sources, a dining room that used water-driven mechanisms to rotate like the heavens. These imperial vanity projects, including the massive rotating platforms on the Nemi ships, served as a centuries-long laboratory for the Roman workforce. By the time Hadrian began the Pantheon, he had access to crews whose collective, undocumented experience allowed them to execute a vision that seemed mathematically impossible. When the Pantheon was finished, Hadrian made a choice against the standard practice of Roman emperors. He refused to put his own name on the facade. The bronze letters still credit Marcus Agrippa, the man who built the original temple on this site decades before Hadrian's version. By omitting his own name and honoring a predecessor, Hadrian performed a final act of subtraction, prioritizing the site's history over his personal recognition. The material itself is just as resilient as the design. Over 19 centuries, this concrete has developed cracks that chemically reseal themselves over time. This self-healing property is the ultimate mystery. What specific chemical elements were mixed into this concrete to make it nearly immortal? The master builders relied on intuition and left no written records. The exact recipe remains a void, a secret that the modern world is only now beginning to uncover. Every story you have watched tonight was standing on the same material. The sewers, the aqueducts, the piers in the river, the ramps, the dome. All of it was that gray mix, and all of it is still here. Which finally brings us back to a laboratory in Massachusetts and a crack that closed itself. There was something in that concrete. Time to tell you what it was and how an empire full of the finest builders on Earth managed to lose it completely. Remember where this story began? A laboratory in Massachusetts in 2023, and a cracked piece of concrete older than most religions. The researchers added water and waited, and over the following days, they watched the crack seal itself shut. Everything you have watched tonight was leading here. Modern concrete is the most used material on Earth, and it starts dying the day it is poured. 50 years, maybe 100, then the cracks win. Roman concrete has stood for 2,000 years, and in the harbors, where seawater should have destroyed it fastest, it did something no material should do. It got stronger. For decades, scientists studying Roman concrete kept finding the same flaw: small white lumps of lime scattered through every sample, from London to Judea. The verdict was almost condescending: sloppy mixing, bad quality control. The greatest builders in history, it seemed, could not stir a batch properly. Those lumps sat in museum samples for a century, in plain sight of everyone. Rome's greatest secret spent a century disguised as a mistake. Before the answer, you need to know the base ingredient. The heart of Roman concrete was Pozzolana, volcanic ash dug from the burned fields around the Bay of Naples. The same volcanoes that buried Pompeii built Rome. The Romans prized that ash so highly they shipped it across the entire Mediterranean like grain. When King Herod wanted a harbor on the coast of Judea, where no harbor could exist, Roman engineers sank timber forms into the open sea and poured this ash concrete straight into the waves. It hardened underwater, an artificial harbor, conjured out of a shipload of volcano, on a coast with no natural shelter at all. Those blocks are still there. The truth about the white lumps came out when researchers finally asked a different question. What if they were supposed to be there? The Romans, it turns out, mixed their concrete hot. Instead of gently slaking their lime first, the crews threw raw quicklime straight into the volcanic ash and water. The mix boiled. The reaction scorched through the batch, and that violent shortcut seeded every pore with millions of tiny white capsules of pure reactive lime. Here's what those capsules do. When the concrete cracks, water gets in, which is how all concrete begins to die. But in Roman concrete, the water hits a lime capsule and dissolves it. The dissolved lime flows into the crack, and there it crystallizes back into stone, filling the wound solid. The building bleeds and then it clots. Every Roman pore carried its own repair kit, waiting centuries for the day it would be needed. In 2023, the team at MIT rebuilt the ancient recipe and cracked it on purpose. Within weeks, the Roman formula had healed itself watertight. The modern control sample sat beside it, cracked and leaking, forever. The mistake was a masterpiece. And the sea? The volcanic ash kept reacting with seawater itself, growing rare interlocking crystals through the concrete for centuries. Every storm that should have broken those harbors was feeding them. The Romans had accidentally invented a material in conversation with the ocean. So why did it vanish? You already know. You watch it happen across this whole story. The knowledge lived in Agrippa's train crews, in the hands of the men who poured Apollodorus' piers, in the muscle memory of legions who built a bridge twice as fast the second time. It lived everywhere except on paper. One Roman, Vitruvius, wrote a builder's manual, and it survived. But he recorded proportions, not practice. The ratios, not the feel. Nothing about throwing the quicklime in hot. Remember Frontinus. What he wrote down, we can still read today. What the concrete crews never wrote down, the world lost completely. When the empire stopped building, the crews stopped rotating, and the veterans' hands found no apprentice hands to teach. The chain that survived Caesar, Agrippa, and Hadrian needed only one generation of silence to break. The recipe did not burn in a library, it simply retired and died. Until now. Since the discovery, engineers have started pouring self-healing concrete based on the Roman formula, aiming at buildings that patch their own wounds and last for centuries instead of decades. 2,000 years after their last pour, Rome's nameless engineers are back on the job site teaching us. An empire's greatest minds put their genius into stone instead of books, and it very nearly vanished forever. That is the whole story you have just watched. So leave with this question, because it is not really about Rome. Somewhere right now, in some workshop or lab or crew you have never heard of, is knowledge that exists only in the heads of the people using it. What are we building today that no one is writing down? If you made it all the way to the end of this, thank you. Really? And if any of it was interesting to you, then that was the whole point. That is the entire reason these get made. I love making things like this, finding something that has been sitting quietly for 2,000 years and putting it back in front of people. There is another one coming. I hope you come back for it. This has been Galaxy Mega Builds,